The moment her hands began to move, the entire lobby seemed to fall silent. Not because anyone had asked for quiet, but because something rare was unfolding in the polished glass heart of the city's most powerful corporate tower. A young intern, barely noticeable among the sea of rushing executives and glowing elevator panels, stood frozen for half a second before lifting trembling fingers into practiced signs. Across from her, an elderly visitor's tired eyes widened with disbelief. And just a few feet behind her, hidden by the reflection of the marble column, the company's CEO had stopped walking entirely. Before we continue, take a second to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Stories, if you believe every story hides a lesson worth discovering. Sometimes the smallest moments carry the biggest truths. The rain had been falling since dawn, turning the city into a blurred watercolor of silver streets and flickering headlights. Inside the towering headquarters of Harlington Global, everything gleamed with cold perfection. The floors reflected every passing heel. The walls of glass made even sunlight feel distant and corporate. It was the kind of building where people measured their worth by job titles and polished shoes, where smiles were often rehearsed and kindness was considered inefficient. At the reception desk stood 22-year-old Eliana Brooks, shoulders slightly hunched as though apologizing for taking up space. She had only been an intern for 3 weeks. Most people barely noticed her except when they needed coffee or copies made. Her dark hair was tied neatly into a low bun, her pale blue blouse pressed carefully that morning in the tiny apartment she shared with her younger brother. She always arrived 30 minutes early, quietly arranging visitor badges with nervous precision, hoping each day she might somehow prove she belonged in a world that felt too sharp and expensive for someone like her. Eliana had spent most of her life trying not to be seen. She had grown up in a modest home on the outskirts of town, where silence often spoke louder than words. Her mother had been deaf since birth. Their home was filled with movement instead of noise, hands dancing through conversations, fingers spelling comfort, laughter expressed in bright eyes and shoulders shaking with joy. Sign language had been Eliana's first language, long before she ever learned to form spoken words clearly. It was where she felt most natural, most alive. But outside her home, it made her feel different, strange, other. So when she entered the corporate world, she tucked that part of herself away like an old photograph hidden in a drawer. That rainy Tuesday had already been difficult. The senior receptionist had called in sick, leaving Eliana alone to manage the flood of executives, deliveries, and impatient clients. Her palms were damp, her stomach twisted each time the phone rang. She kept glancing at the massive brass clock on the wall, counting the hours until she could leave. Then he walked in. He looked to be in his late 60s, wearing a dark wool coat soaked at the shoulders from rain. His silver hair was slicked back, and his eyes carried the weary caution of someone accustomed to being overlooked. He approached the desk with measured steps, clutching a folded meeting confirmation. Eliana gave the practiced corporate smile she'd rehearsed in the mirror. The man looked at her lips, then gently pointed to his ear before shaking his head. And just like that, the world shifted. Her heartbeat stumbled. Without thinking, without planning, without the fear that usually stopped her, Eliana raised her hands. "Good morning. Welcome. How may I help you?" The signs flowed instinctively, elegant and certain, years of memory moving through her fingers. For a second, the man simply stared. Then his face transformed. The exhaustion vanished. His expression cracked open with pure astonishment, followed by something softer, gratitude so deep it seemed to ache. His hands rose shakily, responding. "You know sign language?" Eliana nodded, her own surprise blooming into a shy smile. The tension inside her chest loosened as they continued. She explained where his meeting would be held, offered to escort him upstairs, and even joked lightly in sign about the terrible weather. The man laughed silently, his shoulders lifting. And as they signed back and forth beneath the sterile glow of the lobby lights, something extraordinary happened. People stopped. Executives rushing to elevators slowed their steps. Assistants clutching tablets glanced over. Conversations paused, not because the moment was loud, because it was beautiful. Eliana never noticed the tall figure standing several feet behind her near the marble column. Nathaniel Hayes, CEO of Harlington Global, had been on his way to an emergency board meeting. At 48, he was known as brilliant, demanding, and impossible to impress. His schedule was planned down to the minute. His reputation was built on relentless precision. Yet there he stood, motionless, watching, because the deaf visitor standing at Eliana's desk was not just any client. He was Samuel Mercer, founder of Mercer Technologies, billionaire investor, The man whose partnership could reshape Harlington Global's future. And he was also Nathaniel's estranged father. No one at the company knew. Not even Eliana. Years earlier, after the death of Nathaniel's mother, father and son had fractured under grief too heavy for either to carry. Words had failed them. Silence had widened between them until it became permanent. Nathaniel had buried himself in ambition. Samuel had retreated into private life after losing most of his hearing completely. They had not spoken in nearly 12 years. Today's meeting was supposed to be strictly business. Cold, controlled, professional. But as Nathaniel watched his father smile, truly smile, while communicating effortlessly with a nervous intern, something inside him shifted with painful force. He realized he had forgotten what his father's face looked like when lit by joy. The board meeting began 20 minutes late. Eliana assumed she was in trouble when she was summoned upstairs. Her stomach sank as she rode the private elevator to the executive floor. The polished chrome walls reflected her pale face and trembling hands. She replayed every detail in panic. Had she broken protocol, been unprofessional, too familiar? The CEO's office was vast and severe, lined with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the rain-soaked skyline. Nathaniel stood by the glass, hands clasped behind his back. He turned slowly as she entered. His expression was unreadable. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then his voice, low and steady, broke the silence. He thanked her, not with corporate politeness, with something raw. He told her she had given his father something he hadn't experienced in years, the simple dignity of being fully understood. Eliana stood frozen, unable to process what she was hearing. Nathaniel explained who Samuel was. Explained the years of distance. Explained how watching her had forced him to confront everything silence had stolen between them. His usually sharp features softened. And for the first time in perhaps his entire professional life, he looked uncertain. That afternoon, after the meeting ended, Nathaniel walked his father to the lobby himself. Eliana was organizing visitor passes when she saw them. The two men stopped near the revolving doors. For several heavy seconds, neither moved. Then Nathaniel awkwardly lifted his hands. The signs were clumsy, incomplete, clearly forgotten from childhood lessons his mother once taught him. But understandable. "I'm sorry." Samuel's breath caught. His own hands rose, older but steadier. "I know." Then they embraced there beneath the towering glass ceiling while rain traced silver rivers down the windows behind them. And Eliana, standing quietly at her desk, felt tears sting her eyes. Not because it was dramatic. Not because it was perfect. But because some wounds begin healing in the smallest, quietest ways. Weeks later, Eliana was offered a permanent position leading Harlington Global's new accessibility initiative. Yet what stayed with her wasn't the promotion. It was the handwritten note left on her desk one evening. It came from Samuel. It simply read, "Your hands gave my son back to me." If this story touched your heart even a little, comment, "Kindness speaks louder," below before we reach the end. Sometimes your words might remind someone that small gestures matter. Months later, on a bright spring morning, Eliana watched from the same reception desk as Nathaniel and Samuel entered the building together, talking through a mixture of speech, laughter, and imperfect but determined signs. And in that moment, she understood something she had never fully believed before. The parts of ourselves we hide to fit into the world are often the very parts capable of changing it. If this story made you feel something, hope, warmth, even a quiet ache, like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Stories. Your support helps keep these human moments alive, because sometimes, the most powerful thing a person can say, is spoken without a single word.